Good afternoon, folks. Here it is, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there. And it's a perfect day to come out, go down to the orchard, and start pruning up some trees. So, why do you want to prune your fruit trees? Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to help control the size and help get greater yields of fruit. It also, by pruning your trees, you are able to get easier access to your fruits. That's one of the main reasons we like to prune our trees. Otherwise, they can get kind of unruly and get really tall and just completely out of control. Also, by trimming back your trees every year, you're renewing the fruiting wood. Some trees, they need 1-year-old growth to produce fruit. Some trees, they need 2-year growth and more to produce fruit on. So you got to know what types and species of trees you've got to know what kind of wood you're going to have to prune off of your trees. By pruning your trees, you will essentially maximize your harvest, but you also want to prune your trees and remove any diseased wood so that way it doesn't affect the rest of the tree. It's like cutting out a cancer. And the way you prune your trees is dependent on the type of tree you have, number one. And well, let me just show you what we're talking about. Here we are, we're walking back to our orchard, and you can see I've got a stand of fruit trees here. I don't know how well you can see that right now. I'm a little bit away yet. But another reason we want to prune these trees is to allow for airflow and sunlight to get into the canopy, and the airflow especially helps dry out the dew on these trees in the early morning, and that helps prevent a lot of the issues you might have with rust and mildews and molds and things of that nature. Pruning trees is not really that difficult. It can be done in 4 easy steps. The first step you want to do is you want to stand back and look at your tree, and you want to clean it up. And this is done by using the 3 Ds of pruning, which are removing the dead limbs, removing the damaged limbs, and removing anything that might be diseased. And I'll show you some of this in a little bit when I actually start removing some of these limbs and pruning these trees up. The next thing you need to do is you need to remove any epicormic sprouts, because all epicormic sprouts do is they remove energy and nutrients from the rest of the tree. So you don't really get much production off of them. And there's 2 types of epicormic sprouts on most of these trees. You get what's called water sprouts, which this right here, looks like a pretty good water sprout to me. Go straight up, not much on it. It is real whip-like. And these grow vertical off the main branches of your tree. And then suckers, which they come out of the bottom. This one doesn't have any. I got those pruned off earlier this year. But suckers, they actually come off the root base of your tree. You don't want that either, because that helps, to keep nutrients from the rest of your tree. So it's just better to just get rid of those while you can. Next thing you're going to look for is you're going to look at thinning out your tree. These have a open base form, and I'll get to that in a moment, but there's multiple types of thinnings. The main type of thinning that you see a lot is the central leader. Like this apple tree down here, it's got 1 central leader, goes straight up, and this allows for evenly lateral branching, and this tree right here is going to get pruned back a lot today. It needs some major TLC, and I'll work on that, and it'll be a lot happier this spring. But it's most often used for central leader pruning, is most often used for fruit trees and in tight spaces. One of the issues with having a central leader is sometimes your tree will become too tall. This apple tree is probably 24 foot tall. That's too big for my little plot here, so I'm gonna have to work on that. The next method of pruning is called the open center or vase method. And right here, this is a pretty good example of the open center. But again, it needs some TLC, and we'll get that all pruned up, and you'll see what I'm talking about at the end of the video. The central leader on this is completely removed. The secondary branches have been trained to grow out and up in a vase-like shape. This makes pruning and harvesting and pest and disease control pretty easy to deal with. And it allows for sunlight and air to circulate around the canopy of the tree, which is essentially what you want. Then we have a modified leader, which is similar to this one right here, where the top leader was removed and then you had other layers, take its place. That tree's got a ton of epicormic sprouts on it, and I'm gonna get those all cleaned up and get a bunch of that stuff removed, and these trees will look a lot better when we're done. It maintains the height and width. These trees are probably 16 feet across now. We've lived here on this place 4 years, so they're doing pretty well. Last year was the first year they started fruiting, and these trees were established when we purchased this property 5 years ago. Last year was the first year they started fruiting, and I didn't realize it until it was midway through summer, so I didn't get any fruit production off of these trees this year, but that's okay. And then the last commonly used type of pruning is called espalier, or sometimes pronounced espalier. And when you think of that, I don't have any on my homestead at this time, but that's essentially pruning a tree to grow flat against some sort of object. Think of grapevines. You know how they grow up and they have lateral shoots, and they grow up a little bit more and they have lateral shoots, and they're flat. So what do you thin on these trees? Well, you need to remember CAC, clustering, acute, and crossing. Any time you have a cluster of branches, they need removed. Anytime you have acute angles, they need removed. Anytime you have crossing branches, they need removed. Otherwise, you can have some serious issues later on. Now, by crossing branches, that's what I'm talking about. That branch is crossed this one right here, and in multiple places. So we're going to have to get that cleaned up. The acute angles, I don't see any readily off. Oh, there's one right there. The acute angles is like that angle right there, right in the middle of the screen. Those are not very strong angles, especially when they're laden with fruit. So we'll get those cleaned up as well. And then clustering, like right here, we have multiple clusters all in one area. Some of those got trimmed off last year, but it looks like they're coming back. So I'll get those cleaned up as well. Then we go into anything that is downward facing, like that branch right there obviously broke off. But we have some branches that are angled downward, like this one right here. That'll get removed. Cross branches, and any branch that grows towards the center of your tree. You don't want that because that restricts airflow and movement, and that's not good. So a few more things you need to think about when you're dealing with fruit trees is how high you want them. It's called heading back. And here you remove the top portion of a tree, and you cut back the limbs, so you get to some older growth. And this is again dependent on the type of fruit trees. You have apple trees, for instance, grow on 2-year-old wood. Peach trees, which I got peach trees over here in cages, they grow on 1-year-old shoots. But you never want to take more than about 20 to 30% of your tree's canopy in one season. You can seriously stunt your tree's production. Now, A lot of this will make a lot more sense when I get around to actually showing you how it's done. But you're gonna need a few tools. You're gonna need a pole saw. You're gonna need a set of sharp shears, and you're gonna need a set of loppers. Now, one more thing I always carry with me back to the orchard is a bottle of isopropyl alcohol. When you're cutting off limbs and branches, and especially if something is diseased or dying, you don't want to spread that to your other. So before you go to the next tree, you need to seriously sit down and clean your equipment. So let me get a few things set up and we'll be right back, and I'll show you how these trees look. Okay, here we are, I'm back. And you can see I've given this tree a pretty good haircut and thinned it out substantially and cut about 5 feet off the overall top and opened up the center. This is what you're looking for in a fruit tree. Now in the spring, this will be hopefully heavily laden with fruit. We have a few more to do, and until next time, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. God bless.